This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Appreciate you joining us. Kind of an international version of Real Talk as we take a look at some of the stories that are leading the headlines around the world, including everything going sideways in the state of California, as that state's governor, Gavin Newsom, has confirmed that he will be suing President Donald Trump over the deployment of the National Guard. This in response to riots, significant ones, protesting the immigration crackdowns in that state. That state, obviously, a major player in U.S. politics, obviously a major economy in the United States, and it has people wondering what the bigger picture looks like. We'll be getting into it with former Canadian ambassador to Afghanistan, former Canadian immigration minister Chris Alexander in just a moment. Also keeping an eye on what's happening, a prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine. This after hundreds of drones were launched by the Russians at Ukrainian targets over the weekend. And, of course, Canada preparing to welcome the G7 in our home province of Alberta in beautiful Kananaskis country. This on the heels of Prime Minister Mark Carney's meeting with the first ministers, with the premiers. What does it all mean? We'll get into it, the details in this episode, which is made possible by our friends at We Know Training. You can find them online at wkt.ca. In a world where credentials and compliance really matter, especially in regulated industries, whether it's somebody looking after your loved one in a long-term care center or somebody running a forklift on a job site, you need to know that their credentials are valid. Well, We Know Training is building something much bigger than just training courses. They're creating the infrastructure of trust. And that means that when somebody says that they're certified, you can believe it because everything is backed by digital credentials that cannot be faked. And industry experts will tell you that's something that the world needs right now. We Know Training doesn't just deliver the training, they deliver proof that you've done the work and that you've earned the credential. Verifiable, secure, and stored in your digital wallet. It's how the future of learning should work and how it is working. For those that are partnering with We Know Training, you can learn more online at wkt.ca. Protesters hurling chunks of concrete. You've likely seen this. Rocks, electric scooters, fireworks at California Highway Patrol officers, dozens of damaged police vehicles, and hundreds of arrests over the weekend as the world watches one of the United States' most populated states on the West Coast, that is California. Of course, home to many Americans who have crossed the border either illegally or are finding work there. It's probably one of the big reasons why the American president, Donald Trump, has deployed those ICE agents, why those arrests have been happening. But the people of California have pushed back, including their governor, and tensions are escalating as we speak. Chris Alexander was Canada's Minister of Citizenship and Immigration under Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Before that, he was the Canadian ambassador to Afghanistan, a good friend of this show. It's nice to see you again. Thanks for helping us make sense of this. Where's your head at after a few days of protest demonstrations? I won't call it rioting maybe quite yet in California, would you? Chris, we're just going to check your audio and make sure that we have you going here. Johnny will get that sorted. Of course, this is a story that's been making news around the world, and for good reason. Police headquarters in the city of Los Angeles, a city of 4 million people, has been attacked as well. 3-4 days now into the Monday of demonstrations against the president's immigration crackdown in the region. It's the arrival of 300 National Guard officers that has spurred anger and fear among many residents, and not just in the state of California. It's Senator Gavin Newsom, of course, who's speaking most loudly about this, but elected representatives across the United States are raising the red flag right now, suggesting that what's happening in California could be happening anywhere, potentially will happen elsewhere, and it's the type of thing that Americans should have expected based on the president's aspirations. Now, the White House says that the National Guard has been deployed specifically to protect federal buildings, including that downtown detention center where protesters have congregated. The president himself on his social media platform, Truth Social, suggesting that all protesters in face masks will be arrested. It's, of course, a nation where the right to demonstrate and the right to protest is held dear. This is something, obviously, that is concerning a lot of people based on the precedent that the White House is setting. The President of the United States expecting to square off legally against the governor of California. We're going to bring you that clip in just a second. How are we doing with Chris Alexander? Just 1 second here. Now, of course, the demonstration all started following a couple of days of protest when the National Guard was deployed. That was Friday. That was 3 days ago from when we're talking to you now. In particular, in the community of Paramount. This is a city with a heavy Latino population just south of Los Angeles, as well as neighboring Compton. Chris Alexander joining us. How are you wrapping your mind around what you're seeing in the state of California, Chris?
Well, it's shocking, but it's also inevitable, Ryan, in a sense. We've seen the president and his team, his White House, moving in these directions. And there are really three things coming to a head in California. One is this immigration issue, which you've been describing. Are asylum claimants, are people who are in the United States but without legal status going to be treated by due process under the law, or are they going to be rounded up by masked officials and put into absolutely inhumane conditions inside or outside the United States? That's one issue. The second issue is this political showdown. Gavin Newsom is one of the potential challengers to Trump or Vance. He's clearly targeted by these actions in California, and his credibility is on the line too. And then thirdly, there's the issue of where is the United States going? This is a president that organized an armed riot in and around Congress because he didn't accept the results of the last election. Is he using the National Guard here, by using the National Guard here, testing the limits of presidential authority and preparing to use force, uniformed units against political enemies and to hold on to power?
Why? Maybe give us an idea of why you think deploying the National Guard is such a big deal, why it's so significant here.
Well, first of all, it's an area that is debated in terms of federal authority versus state authority, but the president does have an authority if he's unscrupulous like Donald Trump and willing to declare an emergency that isn't actually there. And he's done this on a number of fronts. He's done it to justify tariffs using emergency powers that really are available, should be available only in wartime, but are being used against us and others in peacetime. And courts are starting to strike that down, but they haven't prevented him from taking those decisions. So it's an area where there is presidential authority. It's usually circumscribed, and Trump is taking it to the wall much further. And then secondly, there's the issue of protest. Are you allowed to oppose this president? Are you allowed to be a high-profile anchor on network news and really pick apart what the Trump administration is doing journalistically, or even as a commentator, and not be threatened by the White House press secretary? Similarly, are you allowed to protest the way migrants are being treated without being treated as a criminal? I mean, that's what's in question in California today. And using the National Guard against a protest, which was really not violent. I don't see any evidence that there was a threat to local peace and security, to public order. That's a next step. And we haven't seen a U.S. president use the National Guard in this way since 1965, when it was used, as the civil rights movement was unfolding on behalf of a president who believed in that agenda, or by a president who believed in that agenda, and against people who were countering. Now we see a president with authoritarian instincts using it, and that's much more dangerous.
Yeah, your reference to the news anchor, which I thought was an interesting story. I'll reference a CNN report here as ABC News has suspended Terry Moran after The Trump administration has condemned a hater post. This was a highly critical assessment of the president and of Trump's deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller, on X, formerly known as Twitter, where he said both the president of the United States and Miller are, quote, world-class haters. He said the president of the United States has hatred only as a means to an end, and that end is his own glorification, his spiritual nourishment. You don't see a mainstream, a nationally or internationally known news anchor speaking like that. That could suggest a couple of things, including the fact that the president's behavior is unprecedented, but it's not just a clash with the Democratic governor, and it's not just a clash with demonstrators, it's mainstream media as well. Does that add a layer of this to you as a former elected minister?
Absolutely. And you and your viewers will have different views of those, how appropriate that journalist, that news anchor's comments were. Some people will share it. Some people will absolutely reject it. But it shouldn't be the president of the United States deciding whether the person keeps their job as a result of those comments.
Yeah,
it should be the news organization. It should be a question of professional ethics. It should be whatever standards are set inside that news organization. And of course, Trump is blowing all of that apart and politicizing everything. And unfortunately, getting a lot of people to fall into line because they're afraid, whether they're, white shoe law firms in Washington or investment bankers in New York or senior otherwise respected journalists in the media. They're afraid of losing their access to the White House, of having retaliation from the White House. And fear and intimidation are taking this Trump administration a long way so far in terms of pursuing an agenda that most people see as most of us in Canada, at least, and many, many Americans see as excessive on many, many fronts.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are talking about the First Amendment rights. They're concerned that could be threatened here. Of course, the right to free speech, essentially. I will acknowledge that, it's on one hand, an internationally known and celebrated former anchor, Dan Rather, has been very outspoken about this administration, but we've not necessarily seen, maybe with the exception of cable news. And I think we expect different things from cable news anchors, so to speak, and certainly political commentators, but you don't typically see mainstream anchors speaking out for fears of the perception of compromising their objectivity. But this is an entirely different animal. This administration is unlike anything anybody's ever seen. And that, to me, was probably what I thought was most significant about Terry Moran's post, was that the president of the United States is behaving unlike any other president in recent American history, at the very least. And I think that sort of says a lot, and it probably says a lot to the rest of the world. But it probably also, to a certain degree, works in the president's favor for supporters of his that have been critical of the relationship that the news media has had with him. I promise I won't obsess on the media angle on this, but I did think that it was a remarkable development over the past couple of days.
Yes, he is playing to part of his base who've rejected the so-called mainstream media and only rely on their chosen commentators who, by and large, reflect their views and reinforce their biases. But whether or not you see those comments as remotely germane or appropriate in this day and age depends a bit on what you think the president is trying to do, the president and his team. Someone I respect a great deal on the Ukraine-Russia issue, Garry Kasparov, the former chess grandmaster, who is now arguably the informal leader of the real Russian opposition to Putin's fascist regime. He is now talking about the Putinization of the United States. And I lived through this in the first years Putin was in power in Russia from 2000 to 2003, when I was last posted to our embassy there. Very few people in Russia or outside Russia were very concerned about the curbs he was already introducing in those early years on media, about the fact that quietly his people were starting to say, no, I don't want that on the news tonight. I'd like this in the lineup. Or I'd like you to promote this journalist, not that journalist. The Kremlin was taking control in those years in ways that weren't obvious because there was still diversity in the media. There were still investigative reports, including of Putin, but it allowed them in subsequent years to really lock things down. Now, the United States is a very different fish. I'm not suggesting it doesn't have this KGB totalitarian past, and Donald Trump doesn't have absolute power the way Putin very soon came to have it in Russia. But the fact that something is changing in the plumbing behind the media, behind government, that hasn't been fully exposed to the public. The public isn't fully aware of. Even well-informed people are not fully aware of. I think that is a claim that one can make right now. And when Garry Kasparov makes it, and others, Americans, who were born in the United States as well, are making it. Someone like Tim Snyder, who's moved from Yale to Toronto here, and writes about totalitarianism and tyranny. They're not saying that the United States has flipped and gone, crossed the Rubicon on this, but they're saying there are dangerous trends, Putinization, authoritarian tendencies going further than they did in Trump's first term. That deserves attention, in my view.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning what Garry Kasparov had retweeted or had posted on his social media over the past couple of days. Former South Dakota governor, now the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, had tweeted back in 2024, quote, "If Joe Biden federalizes the National Guard, that would be a direct attack on states' rights. Over the last several years, we've seen Democrats try to take away our freedoms of religion, assembly, and speech. We can't let them take away our right to defend ourselves, too. South Dakota defends the Constitution." That from the Homeland Security Secretary. Kasparov amplifying that and says it's always about power, and that's usually about money. Says the autocrat's ability to manufacture emergencies and crises, one after another, some real, some fictional, is a key element of concentrating power and attention and dismantling democratic checks. That's along the lines of what California's governor, Gavin Newsom, has said in confirming that he intends to sue Donald Trump. Here's what Gavin Newsom had to say just a short time ago.
Has been here 10 years. The fear, the horror, the hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy. I don't give a damn. But I care about my community. I care about this community. The hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop. And we need to push back. And I'm sorry to be so clear, but that kind of bloviating is exhausting. So, Tom, arrest me. Let's go.
The perception is there's a lot of...
That in an interview with MSNBC, the governor of California daring the White House or agents to come arrest him. This is next level, to state the obvious.
Very much so. And they're not really hiding this agenda anymore. The likes of Steve Miller, who you mentioned, Steve Bannon, they are openly championing authoritarian models, not just the Russian one, but others that are like it. Musk has apparently broken up with these guys, but he was with them for a long time. He helped to put Trump in the White House. And his father is going to this conference in Moscow being hosted by Alexander Dugin, who is the fascist ideologue behind today's Kremlin. And you see Dugin on Twitter. I hope you don't follow him, Ryan, but he's there cheering on MAGA. And when things don't go well, when they don't withdraw support from Ukraine fast enough or crack down on their enemies decisively enough, Dugin says, "What's going on, MAGA? You should be doing what you told us you would do. You should be doing what we've done." And of course, he's trying to provoke people in the United States and everywhere else. But there is a clear bond, a clear fealty among these people who are running the United States or running the White House at the moment and have a lot of control in Congress, and the ideologues around today's Kremlin who are running influence operations throughout Europe and around the world to try and promote people who are like them, who are anti-immigration, who are really anti-democracy, who want a kind of monarchical tyranny because they think it works better, and benefit from that kind of model through the many opportunities for corruption that it creates. Trump is an echo of their vision for the moment, and he's trying to put flesh on the bones.
A friend of mine shared this over the weekend. Now, I'll acknowledge, Chris, don't roll your eyes. I'm about to quote a fictional character from Battlestar Galactica. So I'm not looking to them as an insightful reference on this specific scenario. But my friend shared this quote from William Adama, who says there's a reason you separate military and the police. One fights the enemies of the state. The other serves and protects the people. And when the military becomes both, then the enemies of the state tend to become the people. That from Battlestar Galactica. We've got Shelby in our live chat, powered by Park Power, who says, well, when did law and order become a thing of the past? When does cracking down and enforcing law and order turn into authoritarianism? When does it jump that line, in your opinion?
Well, I think we all agree that if crimes are being committed, they have to be treated that way. It's just that no one that I've read, whose account I've read, saw crimes being committed by these demonstrators in California and elsewhere across the U.S. who are literally championing the cause of asylum seekers, migrants, and so forth, before the National Guard showed up and started firing tear gas and rubber bullets at them. And that did create a response. That did create a riot. Perhaps that's what they wanted. But it was the federal use of force that provoked the violence, not the other way around. I don't think there's any other way of reading that situation in California. And that's why Gavin Newsom and so many others are so outraged. But you're right. There is a line. There ought to be a very clear line between policing and the use of armed force, the use of armies, and forces that train to use lethal force against external enemies. There's also a question of accountability that arises. These ICE units, we think they're ICE units that have shown up in New York, California, all over the country, and just rounded people up, are not wearing uniforms. Their faces are covered. And in most cases, even the most diligent journalists, can't find out who they actually are. And that's another, signature hallmark of authoritarian regimes, that people can show up and knock on your door, and you never really know who they are. In the Soviet Union, you assumed they were the KGB. And Sri Lanka, these white vans would show up. You assumed they were the security service of the state in Colombo. But no one leaves a card. There's no administrative record to check. And we're starting to see that kind of apparently arbitrary use of power in the United States as well, and use of force against people, migrants at the moment, but we're starting to cross the line towards political enemies as well. If Gavin Newsom thinks it's actually realistic for the president to send someone to arrest him, that in itself is shocking.
Yeah, I mean, what happens then? Like, I guess the question here now is like, or maybe not the question. Let me say that it's quite obvious that this is sending jitters across the United States. Let's actually take a quick listen to this. Here's Senator Ed Markey out of Massachusetts, the other side of the country. Sympathetic political views, I'm sure, to Gavin Newsom, but still, here it is from the senator in Massachusetts.
Make no mistake, what the Trump administration is trying to do in response to protests in California and across the country is to stoke fear and escalate tensions rather than de-escalate tensions. It is straight out of the authoritarian playbook. That's what Trump is all about. Trump is trying to act like a king and a bully, and anyone who disagrees with him will be punished. But we will not stand for it. No one, Democrat or Republican, should be silent in the face of this administration's authoritarian actions.
That's Senator Ed Markey. So, what are folks to think in New York? What are folks to think in the opposite side of the country, in particular in states that didn't vote red back in November? I mean, what could this mean across the nation? I guess that's the real big question.
Yeah, it's a huge question. What will we be calling the United States in a year or two? We've been calling it a flawed democracy for the last several years. Because of, for a number of reasons, because of inequality, because of unregulated campaign financing, because of immigration issues because of Trump's first term. But we're now looking at scenarios that could be very dangerous. Will the president, if there are court decisions that go against him, say Gavin Newsom wins his lawsuit in California, will there be consequences? Will he ignore those decisions and use the National Guard again? I mean, this has the potential to escalate in a way that we haven't seen in recent American history. And I think anyone who's a student of Trump's character, an observer of Trump's character, knows that he is unlikely to change his behavior for the better. To receive a caution and try to make a course correction in order to, get better marks from the public in the future. He's pandering to a group that don't mind these authoritarian instincts. We don't know exactly how large they are, but it's a significant part of the American population. And he is normalizing behavior by the White House that has been considered unacceptable for decades, and perhaps from the founding. So we're into uncharted territory here. His real playbook is not American. It is Russian. It is from the Kremlin. It is from other authoritarians. It's a lot of people in his administration that admire Viktor Orban, who's tightened up his control of Hungary in a slightly different way. There are other models around the world that they're following, but they're not American. They are authoritarian. And this is a real test for checks and balances, the US Constitution, the courage of his political opponents, and their ability to continue to get organized and get access to social media platforms, which are increasingly dominated by libertarian owners who, for one reason or another, share Trump's agenda or are part of it.
If you're just joining us on the Real Talk live stream presented by California Closets, we're talking to former Canadian Immigration Minister Chris Alexander. Prior to that, he was a former Canadian ambassador to Afghanistan. In our live chat, Emily says, watching all the other stuff going on, it makes you wonder how much of that Trump versus Musk thing was maybe just a smoke screen. Kind of interesting there. And then we've got Erica, who says people are free to peacefully protest whatever they want. She says, but I've seen rock throwing, cars burning, other dangerous public disorders. Even I agree with the reason for the protest, or even if I agree with the reason for the protest, Erica says that's unacceptable. And then we've got Redneck Philosopher, pardon my French, Chris, who says, Real Talk, a.k.a. Trump Derangement Syndrome Live, give it a fucking rest. That from Redneck Philosopher. Now, I didn't bring on some left-wing former cabinet minister, and I'm definitely not comparing Stephen Harper to Donald Trump, but you are a conservative cabinet minister, a conservative immigration minister. As a thought exercise, work with us here. Is there any way to justify the manner in which the White House is managing this?
No. And I have never considered Donald Trump a conservative, not before he came into office the first time, certainly not after the January 6th insurrection. And why is that, Ryan? Because he has had this studious, consistent tendency, almost obsession with bowing the knee to Moscow. We saw it in press conferences with Putin in his first term. We've seen it in the fact that he's done 4 calls with Putin while the rest of the civilized world, every other NATO ally, is boycotting Moscow because they're trying to destroy and prosecute a genocide in the largest country fully in Europe. This is a guy who is pursuing an agenda that is antithetical with democracy, antithetical with free market principles, antithetical with the fundamental freedoms that conservatives have always championed. It's an authoritarian agenda. It's coming out into the open now. It has a lot of support from around the world because authoritarians have been in the ascendant in China, Russia, and elsewhere. And it has some support in the United States because there are people in the private sector, Elon Musk and others, and not in civil society as well, who think that an authoritarian regime works better. that it will work better for them. I mean, Henry Ford was a fierce backer of Adolf Hitler. He thought the Nazi system was more efficient until war was declared and he was brought back into line by FDR. So this is not new in the US system or any system, but it's something that needs to be talked about openly, confronted. Donald Trump is not a conservative. Donald Trump has no concept of what would benefit the United States economically or politically. He is running a gang on mafia principles with the support of authoritarians around the world. And it's caused a crisis in the United States that is now a crisis for us too, because of tariffs and other issues.
Yeah, Greg in our live chat says, I'm begging people to listen to what Chris Alexander is saying here on the show. He says the protests were peaceful until the National Guard showed up and started firing on people. Would you stand around and take that? I mean, Chris, where does it's unfair for me to ask you to look into your crystal ball, but like, where does all of this go? How does all of this end? Dwayne's in our chat talking about the political implications, says, this could cost Trump the midterms and maybe the presidency. But I mean, how do you see this all unfolding?
Well, I think, it's a very long conversation. Every one of your listeners will have views on this. Many of them unique and new, because you can look at this from so many different sides. But there's really, to my mind, a hopeful scenario, and then a dangerous scenario. And the hopeful one is, as your listener says, that the midterms happen. They are more or less fair and free. Trump loses control of one or both houses. Court decisions continue to stand up. He doesn't ignore them, defy them explicitly. He tries to work around them, but the system and the center hold together. The U.S. Constitution holds together, and checks and balances start to do their work again. And to be honest, Democrats start to get their act together and put forward leadership that has a better chance of winning at state level, in Congress, and ultimately the presidency. And Republicans who haven't drunk the Trump Kool-Aid start to take back control of their party. That's the hopeful scenario. The other scenario is that authoritarians continue to gain ground around the world. A president in Poland, presidential candidate just won, who doesn't want Ukraine to join the European Union. I mean, that is a major setback for, I would argue, democracy and stability in Europe. It's not going to stop Ukraine's march towards the European Union, to integrate with into frameworks that its allies have created in Europe and in the Euro-Atlantic space. But if those setbacks get worse, if, say, Germany, after having merits for a while, has an election and falls to the AfD, or an isolationist pro-Moscow president is elected in France, you could see Trump being emboldened even further and starting to disregard court decisions, starting to tamper with the election process, returning to this issue of not leaving office and either staying himself or handing off to Vance, but literally pulling up the Democratic ladder behind them. I think these scenarios need to be talked about. They are real. And the potential to crack down on fundamental freedoms for the White House, to use force, the National Guard and other agencies to crack down on fundamental freedoms in the United States is there. We've seen some examples of them using it. There's a scenario in which those become more of a pattern. So I don't know what determines which path is taken by the United States, but we in Canada and we as citizens have a few things we can do. One is talk about it. Two is, and empower journalists and commentators who really are being truthful about these things. Secondly, keep our own house in order, make it stronger, live the values of our democracy more fully than we ever have before. And thirdly, fight the authoritarians on their own turf. I mean, here, doing more to support Ukraine actually matters in our North American confrontation with Trump over tariffs and so forth. He doesn't want there to be support for Ukraine. If we want leverage over Trump and we want other allies and democracies to support us and support a trading system that we recognize as legitimate, we should be doing more to support Ukraine and making sure that the tide turns there. A lot of democracies are thinking along those lines. I think of the Nordic and Scandinavian countries that are now essentially leading international support for Ukraine. The UK and France have taken steps in that direction. Canada, under a new prime minister, actually with bipartisan support, could do a lot more in Ukraine. That would help us in North America. That would help us highlight what the path should be for the United States and allies that haven't lost their moral compass.
Chris, can we keep you for 10 more minutes?
Sure.
I really want to talk to you about Ukraine. We have to talk. There's a big prisoner swap happening right now. This after a barrage of drones. You mentioned Poland. Poland scrambling aircraft this morning to protect their airspace. They say that they're concerned about this. And obviously the G7 looming. If you want to talk about Canada-U.S. relations, the White House confirming that Donald Trump will be there in Kananaskis. More with Chris Alexander, former Minister of Citizenship and Immigration under Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Before that, a Canadian diplomat, ambassador to Afghanistan. This conversation is happening with the support of North Road Investment Council. Their team, led by Marshall and Carrie, are experts in answering the questions that could be keeping you up at night. If you're wondering, like, how do you protect your savings from taxes or inflation or a market crash, volatile markets these days, if you want to make sure that your family's protected if something happens to you, or trying to figure out if you should take your CPP early or wait, it's time to talk to the team at North Road Investment Council. Their certified financial planners and chartered financial analysts can answer all your retirement and financial planning questions. They're independent fiduciaries, which means you pay them a per-hour fee, not through commissions paid by selling you investment products. It's no fluff, no pressure, just clear advice and strategies that make sense. You can check them out online at northroadic.com. Our friends at Friesen Brothers inviting you to join them for a medieval feast. If you don't have plans for Father's Day, this is a great way to get the family together and enjoy some fantastic food at all the Friesen Brothers Fresh Market locations. An all-you-can-eat feast from 4 to 8 p.m. on the 14th and 15th of June. Enjoy medieval roasted chicken, smoked beef chuck, beer, braised onions, herb roasted baby potatoes, garlic bread, a full salad bar, and a whole lot more. You can find out all the details on their website, Friesen.com, or visit them at your local Friesen Brothers Fresh Market store. And our friends at California Closets reminding you they are proudly Canadian-owned and operated. They're the best in the business in custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home. And this journey all begins with a free consultation. You can sit down with one of their designers, talk to them about the space you're looking to improve, the budget you're working with, and then you let them go to work. Everything that they build is manufactured in our home province of Alberta, and all of it is guaranteed for life, custom designed to fit your space and your budget. It's California Closets, online at californiaclosets.ca. Obviously, a huge story over the past couple of days is Russia launching close to 500 drones at key Ukrainian targets. This as the two nations swap the first prisoners in a large-scale exchange. Chris, what's different this time around? There have been ceasefires and then failures there. There have been reneging on agreements. There's been optimism. There's been, of course, large-scale and mass casualties. Is this a turning point in a positive sense?
I don't think so, Ryan. The only ceasefire we saw from the Russian side, and it wasn't a ceasefire, it was, a tactical reprofiling of their war effort, was over the May 9th period when they didn't want Kiev, the Ukrainian side, attacking their parade in Moscow. Otherwise, they've been escalating. In late May, there was an evening, I think the 24th, 25th May, when a new record was set for missile and drone attacks, as you mentioned. Then on June 6th, another record, close to 500. I think it was 469 attacks, most of which were taken down, but, roughly 50 of which got through. And then last night, 499. So they are ramping up their attacks on Ukraine, and they are mobilizing more troops, pressing south into Sumy region, claiming that they're in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, a part of Ukraine that they hadn't previously attacked, and quietly taking square meter after square meter in Donetsk. Now they're not breaking through. They're losing huge numbers of people. The Ukrainians are hammering them with their drone capacity, which is growing, and their fighter jets, which are now taking down Russian fighter jets because they have some F-16s and Mirages in the air. So it's a competitive fight for Ukraine, but there is no sense that Russia is de-escalating. There is no ground for claiming that they are pursuing peace. Yes, they are engaged in talks, but it's a distraction. It's to generate headlines and keep the White House, chasing its own tail, and prevent the White House and the United States from supporting Ukraine while Russia positions itself to have more leverage and to continue this fight. They are masters of distraction, diversion. Look, here's a shiny object. Meanwhile, they're stabbing their next victim in the back. I think that's more of this and nothing to do with peace. It's really a fake peace plan that Trump has been pushing for several months, and Ukrainians are paying the price. Fortunately, Europe is standing up and doing more, but the United States is doing nothing. Canada is not doing enough, and allies don't yet have a clear plan to support Ukraine decisively.
Chris, what does enough look like in your informed perspective when it comes to Canada? What would you like to see from Prime Minister Mark Carney and his cabinet?
Well, enough looks like embracing the Ukrainian goal, which is to win this war. What does that mean concretely? It means protecting Ukrainian airspace. This should have happened much earlier in this campaign. NATO, Canada would never go to war without sufficient air power to cover our troops, to have air superiority over the enemy. We succeeded in Afghanistan only because we had that air superiority. And yet NATO, led by Biden, unfortunately, and supported by Paris, London, Berlin, and others, refused to give Ukraine air power because, in Biden's view, it was going to escalate the situation. Well, it's escalated anyway. And 3 years later, it's not the United States that's providing Western fighter jets to Ukraine. It's the Netherlands and Denmark. It's Belgium, Greece, and Norway. There are almost 100 F-16s, American-made jets, going to Ukraine, but because of those countries. Canada should be joining that group. We don't have F-16s, but we have a lot of great aircrew and maintainers who could be training Ukrainians, who could be helping to find F-16s in other countries, helping to refit them. If Ukraine had 200 Western jets in the air, it would be a different game. If they had sufficient air defense systems on the ground in Ukraine, these attacks would not be getting through. And then if they had the firepower, the missiles and drone capacity to go everywhere in Russia, to hit all the locations from which these attacks are launched, Ukraine would be in a much stronger position. Canada could play a role on all of those fronts. If we are going to 2%, eventually 3%, I hope, of GDP spent on defense faster than expected, I hope a big part of this goes to Ukraine. We've only spent $3 billion. Sounds like a lot, but $3 billion in military assistance for Ukraine. We spent $18 billion, Ryan, in Afghanistan.
Jeez.
And small countries like Denmark, Sweden, the Netherlands have done a lot more in absolute terms than Canada. We're not in a position we should be in. And as I said earlier, our leadership on Ukraine will pay dividends in our relationship with the United States too. They want us to spend more on defense. Trump wants us to help Moscow. We're not going to do that. And I think most Americans will will back us eventually when they see us taking a principled stance in support of Ukraine.
Yeah, ask John Chrétien about that, right? It aged well with George W. in Iraq. So I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of this liberal government, obviously, but it's not just a lack of capacity that's precluding Canada from offering more support to Ukraine, is there? Like, there's got to be more to it. Why do you think it is?
I think it's because it's gone out of the headlines. Unless there's an overwhelming political reason to do something in these times of gridlock and political inertia, which aren't confined to Canada, which is around the world, especially in democracies, things don't get done unless there's a lot of pressure. And Ukraine hasn't been in the headlines really since the Hamas operation against Israel from Gaza on October 7th, 2023. And a lot of other issues, including the tariff threat from the United States, have displaced Ukraine even more from the headlines. We have to see the bigger picture. This is part of the same authoritarian challenge that we're dealing with in Washington. The hard end of it is in Ukraine, and Ukraine is defending all of us from this onslaught. If Russia succeeds in Ukraine, they will be attacking other parts of Europe, and we will have to fulfill our obligations as an ally to Estonia, to Latvia, where our troops are already based, or to Poland. We don't want to get to that point. We need a decisive result in Ukraine to show authoritarians that they won't succeed with this hard challenge to borders, which we haven't seen since 1945, and to have leverage against the unscrupulous counterparties we're dealing with in Washington, and empower people who are interested in alliances, in trade and democracy in the United States. Those people are feeling beaten down. One way to empower them is by doing the right thing in Ukraine, showing that the tide can be turned, defeating Russia there. Canada can play a huge role. We have hundreds of armored personnel carriers, LAV 3s, Coyotes, and others that are no longer being used by the Canadian forces that could have gone to Ukraine years ago. It wouldn't have cost a huge amount. For some reason, we decided not to do that. We just haven't made it a priority. We've been fairly generous supporting Ukraine financially. On the military side, we've really underperformed. And I think with US support falling off, now is the time to change that channel and do what Canada can do, show the leadership that we showed in 2 world wars, in Korea, in Afghanistan, in a cause that really matters for today.
I did want to play this. I thought it was interesting. This is Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky talking about 20,000 missiles that they were expecting, that were promised from the United States that never arrived. Here he is.
And we counted on this project. 20,000 between us, 20,000 missiles, anti-Shahid missiles. It was not expensive, but it's special technology. So we counted on these 20,000 missiles. Today in the morning, my Minister of Defense told me that the United States moved it to the Middle East.
So the missiles go to the Middle East, not to Ukraine, where they were promised. Does Ukraine need to stop counting on the United States in any way, shape, or form?
I think they have stopped. They're going to keep an oar in there. They're going to keep encouraging Congress to take action on sanctions and on military support, but they're not counting on it. They're building up their own defense industry, and they're getting more from Europe. Europe has a bigger defense industry than people realized. European defense stocks have done better this year than any other part of the European, even global stock markets, because Rheinmetall and the other companies, Thales in France, are going to be needed to replace American capacity in Ukraine and elsewhere. Prime Minister Carney has recognized this. He wants us to be part of this European rearmament strategy, which is needed. And we should be rebuilding our own defense capacity here in Canada. One very smart investment, Ryan, that we could be making tomorrow is to scale up Ukraine's defense industry. They're the ones dealing with these attacks. They're the ones innovating in drone technology. If they have the potential to double their production of a certain number of drones, money shouldn't be a constraint. Denmark and other Europeans have been sending money directly to Ukraine with lots of oversight to make sure that that industry is humming in Ukraine. And Canada could do even more to make sure that it continues to grow and that all the potential to produce things cheaply, quickly in Ukraine is being exhausted so that they stop these attacks, gain air superiority over the Russians, and ultimately push back. Because this is a war. It's a contest on the battlefield, but it's also a contest of political will. We should be showing the political will to support Ukraine, even when the going is tough, even when the US has gone off course. Europe and Canada together can pack quite a punch.
All of this, we're talking about these 2 big stories, one in the United States on home soil, so to speak, in the state of California, obviously this war in Ukraine. On June 15th, beautiful Kananaskis country, just southwest of here, will host the G7, including the American president. You could argue that the G7 will be experiencing or meeting amid a dynamic that it's not seen before. What are you keeping an eye on? And what do you think would be a win for Canada, all things considered? What should be the Prime Minister's top priorities?
Fantastic question. I mean, I know Kananaskis well from the last summit we had there in 2002. I was the number 2 in our embassy in Moscow, and I came back to be Vladimir Putin's liaison, literally there, and probably spent more time with him in the woods of Kananaskis than I did on any other occasion in Moscow when Prime Minister Chrétien came, or at other Team Canada meetings and other contacts I had with him. I mean, how times have changed. The 2002 summit was less than a year after 9/11. It was the first G7, G8 summit after 9/11. Putin was new. He was relatively quiet. The U.S. was still disoriented, I would argue, by what had happened with the Twin Towers and in the Pentagon. And the G8 had to pull together to show support for the U.S., to show support for the mission in Afghanistan. But there was this worry that U.S. attention was already moving on to Iraq. And I think Putin was taking all of this in and was quietly pleased that the United States and its allies were distracted by Afghanistan, were about to be distracted, most of them, by Iraq, so that he could start his plan to regain leverage, influence, and ultimately control of parts of Europe, especially Ukraine, that had fallen out of the Russian orbit. What will be a good result this time? Again, it comes back to Ukraine. We need the G6, because we know Donald Trump won't be on board for this, to show determination, political will to support Ukraine, to make this coalition of the willing, which we've all bought into in recent months since Trump's re-election, into a coalition that is effectively pursuing victory in Ukraine. And that's going to be hard to do. I really wonder whether there shouldn't be a separate statement by the 6, the European Commission and the 6 members, apart from the United States, of the G7 on Ukraine, showing what their political will is, even if the United States is not prepared to sign it. And then on other fronts, we need the United States to acknowledge that the trade war they've been conducting against all of us is getting them nowhere. And that there is an international regime that the United States has benefited from more than any of the rest of us. There needs to be a line drawn under the chaos that we've seen in recent months. But that's going to be very challenging to achieve. And it'll test every capacity our prime minister and the other leaders have to deal with the United States at all levels. So I think we'll all be watching closely. But Russia, while not present this time, is sort of setting the agenda, because it's very hard to bring the 7 together around the issue of Ukraine when Donald Trump's in the room. Donald Trump is seen as someone who does the Kremlin's bidding. He's, credible people call him a Russian asset. He's been on the phone with Putin. He'll probably phone Putin just before the meeting. He is not on our side. He is not on Ukraine's side. How do you deal with that? I don't know. Will he talk about the 51st state when he's in Kananaskis? Let's see. The last time we had a major world leader, ally, talk about, interfere in Canada's sovereignty was Charles de Gaulle in 1967 in Quebec, and he was asked to leave when he made his famous Vive le Québec libre statement. If Trump goes off on a 51st state tangent, how will we react? These are going to be big tests
Chris,
for the prime minister and the whole country.
I've seen, when I say people, I'm talking like people on social media, members of the public, us chattering class, you know what I mean? But a lot of people were saying we shouldn't invite the United States. The United States should be banned. The president of the United States should be banned from the G7, should not be allowed to enter Canada. And I don't know that many people in positions of commentary actually took that seriously. But do you think there could be an argument for that based on what you just said?
Well, I was one of those people.
Really?
When he first made these comments about our sovereignty, about the 51st state, I said that it would be very hard to imagine a leader who has said these things, who's put these things on record, to imagine such a leader coming to a G7 summit on Canadian soil. Now, there has been a change of tone. He has pursued this agenda in a different way since the new government took over. So I think there's some wiggle room there, but he hasn't recanted these statements. He hasn't taken them back. He's still toying with the idea. And we need to take this kind of thing seriously in order not to be a doormat or a laughingstock, in order not to legitimize the idea that we've all find outrageous in this day and age.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think it's like, the word offensive kind of gets played out too much, but I'm talking like when you're offending a nation, regardless of how people vote, that to me is unacceptable. The question is, like, what does the response look like? Chris, we're so grateful for your time. Let me ask you this in closing. It's actually a big story on any other day. We may lead with this one, but Tony in our live chat wonders why the Prime Minister, why Mark Carney would have invited Modi, India, to the G7. She says he must have a plan. I would suggest that the plan at its very core is to try to thaw this relationship a little bit, but what do you read into it?
Yeah, well, I think he's trying to reset things after a very bad period. Things got out of hand. Sikh extremism, terrorism by Khalistanis has been a reality in Canada for decades. It was started, there were players that were starting to champion violence, plans for violence, and India responded in totally inappropriate ways, with criminal actions, as has been reported and confirmed inside Canada. This was the kind of escalation that does no one any good. It doesn't do Canada or India any good to have Sikh extremists and terrorists thriving in Canada. It doesn't do India or Canada any good to have the Indian government and taking direct action in Canada and eliminating its enemies. There have been a lot of conversations about all of that in recent years. We have to hope that a line is being drawn under this, that better forms of behavior, law enforcement in Canada, and refraining from these totally inappropriate criminal acts in Canada on India's part will prevail in the future. Carney is trying to draw a line with someone whose country is still committed to democracy. It's a very imperfect democracy. At a time when China, Russia, and many other major players on the stage are not democracies and challenging the international order on behalf of authoritarian models. So I think it's defensible, this invitation, in every way, but we have to see action from India, proof positive that this behavior has ended. And we also have to see Canada get more serious about national security. It's not just Sikh extremism. It's fundraising for Hamas and Hezbollah. It's gangs linked to drugs and Chinese triads. It's Russian influence. We have been slower than many other democracies in addressing these very, very sharp threats that are now affecting our political culture and our politics internally in Canada. We need a government, and I hope it's the Carney government, with bipartisan support that gets serious about these issues and gets us back on track. We need a Canada whose democracy is effectively protected from foreign interference.
Sharon in our live chat says, what an informative guest. If you want to learn more about what Chris Alexander does and dig into policy, you can check out his website, chrisalexander.ca. Make sure you give him a follow on X as well. We'll link to both in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube. Chris, we always appreciate your perspectives. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. Always a pleasure.
You got it. Former Canadian Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, former Canadian ambassador to Afghanistan. All that. What a wild story, hey? Walking through the woods in Kananaskis with Vladimir Putin more than 20 years ago. You have to imagine that would be one you'd be wrapping your mind around for the 20 years to follow and beyond, based on how that's all unfolded. We welcome your feedback to this. I see some of you in the live chat, referring to this as, NATO participating in a proxy war with Russia. I thought that Chris answered that, and talking about the fear that Russian aggression could spread, this quest for territory, dominance, etc., across Europe. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? As we just observed, the 81st anniversary of D-Day, just a couple of episodes ago, one episode ago, as a matter of fact. Talk@RyanJespersen.com is where you can send us your thoughts on what you heard from Chris and how you're wrapping your mind around what you're seeing. More in just a moment. We'll get back into the live chat and see what you have to say. But on behalf of our friends at Edmonton Opera, I want to make sure that this is on your radar. D. Valcourt is building on Das Rheingold, the next installment of the Ring Cycle, a bold new vision in an intimate and adaptive production directed for a smaller space. This is a super cool collaboration between the Edmonton Opera and the Citadel Theatre. This is being presented at the McLab Theatre. So if you're used to, kind of the classic opera house setup, maybe like the Jubilee Auditorium, well, this one's a little bit different. In the McLab Theatre, you are right up next to the stage, as you are closer than ever to drama, power, and the emotional depth of Wagner's iconic work. Die Walküre is featuring a new arrangement by Jonathan Dove, which modernizes Wagner's epic work. And, of course, this is the first time for an audience in Alberta to also see Russell Braun in a conductor role. Typically, he's an opera singer, so this is a new adventure for him and for the company. This is a unique blend of tradition and modern storytelling, and of course, you have just a limited time to check it out. It's running June 9th. If you catch this today, that's tonight, tomorrow, the 10th, the 12th, and the 13th. This will sell out, so we encourage you to get your tickets today without delay at edmontonopera.com. Also want to show some love to our friends at UCAN Youth Services. This is a remarkable nonprofit charitable organization that Real Talk is very proud to support. They're helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. Check out their website because they've got a few amazing programs at ucan.ca. I want to shine a light on the Verto project today. This is Latin, the word verto, for turnaround or for change. This is a 20-week pre-employment program for young people between 18 and 24 that have all the potential in the world. They just need somebody to show them the door, and they'll walk right through it themselves, out of harm's way, and either back into school or into the workforce. The programming portion that's carried out by UCAN is 8 consecutive weeks, and successful candidates will earn a living allowance of $15 an hour, so they can find the support along the way. And as they graduate out of this program, they're learning things like employment, personal development, technology training. They got a computer lab, conflict resolution training, health and wellness, leadership development, really great stuff that's going to prepare them for employment. Certification in first aid, for Pete's sake. It gives young people the skills necessary to transition back into school or employment by supporting them to find success and independence. How can you help? Well, if you're an employer that's hiring entry-level people, IKEA is a great partner of theirs, as an example. You can reach out to UCAN. This is a great way to ensure that you're not just supporting the community, but also tapping into a talented entry-level workforce. Again, you can find all the details on that Verto project by checking out ucan.ca. And I just wanted to let you know about the Ranch Golf and Country Club. Sometimes I'm talking to you about the fact that they're doing 120 tournaments a year. And sometimes, of course, I'm letting you know about what they have going on over those 18 holes. Absolutely love our time at the ranch. But I did have a chance to get out there just a few days ago, and I am very, very pleased to report that the ranch is looking unbelievable right now. I'm talking mid-season conditions. The fairways look like it's July. The greens were perfect. I mean, not perfect for me. I was 2 and 3 putting absolutely everything. But the experience there at Alberta's top public course was absolutely second to none. This is my buddy Finner here looking to sink a putt for a 96. Johnny, good thing he didn't, because he ended up tapping it in for a 97. We thought that was a good omen, as the Edmonton Oilers, of course, are looking to win that Stanley Cup. Here's my pal Hobie looking to put down a long one. Look at that green. Just beautiful. That's hole 18 at the ranch. A reminder, you can book your tee times today by visiting their website. Of course, that's theranchgolf.com. And don't forget, coming up on the 19th of June, we're excited to welcome 152 of you to our sold-out Real Talk Golf Classic in support of the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship. There's a reason we take our tournament to the ranch, and that's because you don't have more fun anywhere else than you do at the Ranch Golf and Country Club. I saw a suggestion here from Jillian in our live chat. She's looking at setting up an entire new community. I don't know if you saw this, but she's convinced that if the world was run by women, Johnny, that we'd be much better off. This Jillian, as she's listening to, we're like, no argument here. As we're listening to Chris Alexander, she says, if I had Elon Musk money, says Jillian, I would set up a women-only island, kind of like Paradise Island, where Wonder Woman was raised by the Amazonians. And she says, I would take all the fed-up women, we would just chill there, and we would let the boys do their war thing. That from Jillian, and I'm seeing some support there in the chat.
Can I get it like a weekend pass, like a guest pass to that island?
I just don't think we'd be allowed. I think the whole idea is that maybe it could be like women and women adjacent, those supportive of women. Maybe if you'd sign some sort of a
ally pass,
an allied pass, an allied VIP. Yeah, man. So a pretty wild weekend, and I know we've spent a lot of time talking about international news. And we want to let you know, of course, through this week, we're going to have you covered on all the stories that are making news. Obviously, there's a lot happening in provincial politics in our home province of Alberta. And we also have an exclusive with Calgary's Mayor, Jody Gondek. She's going to be joining us on our Wednesday episode. That'll be the 11th of June. So make sure you don't miss that one. Circle that on your calendar. And we also have, I haven't even told you about this yet. This is embargoed. This is a very, very big secret, but a very prominent and exciting Alberta-based band, a legendary Alberta-based band.
Nice.
They've not performed in quite some time. We don't talk to a lot of bands on the show.
Retired?
But this one feels different. They have been retired.
Okay.
And I'm not at liberty to say who it is, but they have announced, they will be announcing on Wednesday, the 11th of June, not a reunion tour, but a single reunion show. And they asked if they could make that announcement on Real Talk. I said, that sounds like a fantastic idea.
Okay.
And so they're going to be joining us, a couple of the band members in studio after our conversation with Mayor Gondek.
Okay,
and we're going to be talking about their legacy. So for all the arts and entertainment lovers, all the I don't even want to say what genre the band is in. They're kind of like a pop rock kind of a genre. But very exciting stuff happening on the 11th.
Okay.
We should let people know as well that Real Talk's taking Tuesday off tomorrow. We're very proud to be supporting the Crystal Kids Golf Tournament. 'Tis the season, and we will be here and there throughout the summer lending our support to various fundraising causes, ones that we feel very strongly about and care deeply about, and that's one of them. So there will be no live episode on the 10th of June, and of course you can always follow us on all of our social media platforms at Real Talk RJ for all of the updates on that. It's also a great opportunity for you to catch up on past episodes that you may have missed. I'm pretty proud of us for going 67 minutes into an episode without even really, for the most part, mentioning the fact that there is Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final, which is happening tonight.
It was nice.
The Edmonton Oilers. I feel like, isn't it funny? You get to the Stanley Cup Final,
stressful,
the fourth round, and only 2 teams out of 32 lucky enough to get to this point. And at the same time, for people that are fully participating in what it looks like to be a fan during the Stanley Cup Final, I know some people are hoping that it ends as quickly as possible. Their wallets can't keep up. Their livers can't keep up. How are you doing?
Well, try working there. I mean, and my job's one of the easy ones. I get to have fun, but I see, like, just a shout out to OEG right now, who is, I mean, working, 12-hour days every day, making sure these events outside and inside the arenas are amazing for fans. And same thing with them. Like, it's stressful. They're all very tired and they want to get to the end of it. But obviously, we all want to win. We all want to celebrate. But then, they're all going to sleep for a week. So big shout out to OEG, who's like, burning the candle at both ends. But for good reason, because this is what you do it for all year, is to get to the big show and to get that mug and bring it home and fill it with Frosty Molson Canadian.
Yeah. Nice shout out there. Is that what you'd be drinking? That's what you'd be filling it with?
There are friends there. The Oilers friends, might as well say the name.
Yeah, good stuff. I do have a praise report, and that is from our good buddy Tony Brar, who does an unbelievable job at Oilers TV and is one of my favorite humans on planet Earth. But he has released this. It is just a 2-second video. This video released just moments ago as we've been recording this show. That is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins that you see on the ice. I was trying to build the suspense.
I couldn't take it. I couldn't
Nuge
take
is on the
another
ice.
player being out.
So they say they're still saying game time decision. I don't
which
believe
usually,
that it's been confirmed yet.
No, but we know when it says game time decision, that usually leans that they're going to play, especially in the playoffs. So it's good news, and it's good news to see him on the ice. If he wasn't on the ice, we know he's not playing, right? So when they say game time, it's usually like he's probably going to play. But, nothing.
You never know.
Sure.
Look at this. So this is funny. Isn't this funny how this works? So from the official NHL.com Twitter account.
Look at that. There it
is. So this is like, we're talking to you now at 9:39 Mountain Time, 11:39 Eastern. Says the Edmonton Oilers are on the ice for their morning skate ahead of Game 3. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is not one of them. He was listed as a game time decision. Obviously, that's going to instill panic among Oilers fans. Then 4 minutes later, the intrepid Chris Johnson says Nuge has joined the Oilers optional morning skate before Game 3. And then you got Tony Brar just a couple of minutes, 5 minutes after that with the video. So Nuge on the ice for the Oilers optional skate this morning. That's a big one.
The NHL account trying
to
instill fear in Canadians.
I know they are.
What's going on here?
For sure. Yeah, oh man. So that's obviously going to be a big one, and I just feel like deep down inside, this is the Connor and Leon show for sure. Evan Bouchard's having a hell of a run as well, but I feel like everybody's kind of just cheering for Nuge. He's the one that's been here the longest. He was that first overall pick, of course.
Having a hell of a season.
Taylor Hall and then Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and these were going to be the pillars, the foundations. He's had an unbelievable year, a really solid past few years. I think he was like 100 points a couple yeall ago, and you and I were joking, for those that don't catch every single episode, on how I thought I was so brilliant and I was going to bet all my money, all $88 of it. I was going to bet it all, $93 maybe, on Nuge being the first to receive the cup. If knock on wood, the Edmonton Oilers are blessed enough to win that cup, and of course it winds out that the odds makers all believe that will be who will receive it as well. But we're not getting ahead of ourselves.
Look at this, Ryan. If he comes back from this injury tonight, has a great game, or is substantial in the final games, winning the cup, I mean, I don't know, man. McDavid's a pretty humble guy. Like, he doesn't get loud. He doesn't, unless it's in the dressing room occasionally when it's really important. He doesn't like talking about himself. You saw that in the last interview where I can't believe this Oilers media, I love you, but like some of these questions, like you've been there 20, 30, 40 years, you can come up with more than, hey, how do you tell a kid how to be Connor McDavid? You can't. And Leon Draisaitl jumps in and basically, like, Connor tries to explain how he does the toe drag, amazing pass to Leon.
Speed.
Yeah. And Leon jumps in and is like, dude, you can't teach that to anyone. You could practice 6 hours, 10 hours, 24 hours a day for years and never. It's just innate ability that people are born with, right? It just happens. But like for Connor, I don't know, man. And I'll throw this out there.
Do you want to just watch this goal again and again and again while we talk? Here it is. Why not throw it up? Because this is just this courtesy of Sportsnet.
Look at that.
You can't teach that.
That
was the reporter that said, "Yeah, how do you teach kids to do this move?" And
how would you kids want to be like Connor McDavid? How would you go about like training to be like you? And
Leon says,
and he starts stumbling. Well, I don't know how to answer. And Leon's just like, you can't. But I don't know if you disagree with me. But let's say Ryan Nugent-Hopkins comes back from this injury. Maybe he's good tonight. Maybe he's good in the last game. Maybe he scores a game-winning goal. If he scores a game-winning goal to win the cup, it's going to for sure happen. But Connor's a humble guy. Maybe he lets Nuge pick it up first, dude.
No.
Maybe.
No.
Maybe.
Not for your – because
why not?
You remember when Sakic did that for Ray Bourque? Because the captain –
because it has – I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, the captain has to take it from Bettman.
Yeah.
So, so it's got to be Connor with the photo op. Now, in theory, we are getting so far ahead of
Like,
ourselves.
I'm talking about
People
the
are gonna be
first
screaming.
round, though, around the ice. It could be nude.
But I think if it was Connor's second, we're getting so far ahead of ourselves. I'm just trying to appeal to. I want to say to the hockey gods, we recognize that we're out of line in the way that we're talking right now, but we're excited. So sue us. Yeah. But I think he's got to be first. I also think that in the moment things could change. Why don't we talk about Game 3?
I also think that Connor amazes and blows our minds sometimes. And for him to pick it up and raise it over his head, but before he takes a round, give it to Nuge. Like, the media would go crazy. It'd be video. You'd be seeing it for the rest of our lives of how humble he was. But anyways, we just know that, like, if it happens, that second round Nuge, it's going to be louder than when Connor brings it around, because people are going to be like,
it's just going to be the news.
Just a relief for him, right?
I love this from Ken K, who just says it's like trying to talk to kids. I mean, it's like learning or teaching a kid how to be Beethoven. Yeah. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
There's certain things that are just like someone's
Let me teach you how to be a Picasso or a Leonardo. Let me show you how to have innate creative and athletic ability ingrained in your bloodstream.
Yeah, no kidding. Gizmo says somebody needs to take Brad Marchand out.
Oh, yeah.
The rat.
Here's what I love about hockey. It gets people so emotional, Ryan.
yeah.
But the thing is, it can flip so fast. And when a player gets traded, I mean, look at it. Like a month or two ago, we were cheering for Brad on Team Canada. We couldn't get enough of him. Oh, we love it. You love it when he's on your team, right? But I do get that, like, the style of hockey that Florida plays, which, the league allows, the refs allow, is a style that a lot of people, it rubs people the wrong way. But hey, at the end of the day, this is all about winning, right? It's about winning. And if you can do it, I don't want to say legally within the rules, because some people agree that they do bend the rules. I agree, but is that an art form too? Like, what Sam Bennett is doing is, to me, infuriating.
Falling on the goalie.
But the way he does it to make it look like he's not doing it on purpose is something that's also
it is an art form.
Learned and trained in, it's something you
100%. It's always and it's always the way in any sport is that you loathe the player until that player is on your team.
It's like Cassian. We hated
and then
Cassian.
You love the player.
And then he came over.
Corey Perry is a great example.
100%. I think people still are like, I mean, when Corey Perry retires, like, is it a big thing for Edmonton? Yes, but it's going to be a bigger thing for Anaheim, right?
Yeah.
And we hated him when he was on Anaheim, right?
No kidding. Now Emily's in the chat. Somebody needs to take Sam Bennett out too. I like this. We'll see. It'll be a spirited first period.
It's
Game 3, tied at 1. I love it.
It's all fun and games till someone actually gets hurt, and then you're like, okay, things have gone too far. Like it's like with the who's the Canucks player got really injured? Steve.
Steve Moore.
Yeah, and then who's our player? Cassian broke his jaw.
What's his Sam?
I wish
Sam
I had
Gagner.
Bob Stauffer
Sam
memory.
Gagner.
Yeah.
Well, we do. It just takes us a second.
and that was why we hated him, right?
Yeah.
And then he came here, and now he's beloved. He's at the playoff games getting standing ovations.
Yeah.
So
shout out to Sam Gagner, by the way, just recently announcing his retirement. The guy's one of one of the real class acts. A guy that you just like to see do really well.
Didn't he pick up a job right away? Like, isn't he
Did
like?
he? I don't know. I didn't pay attention to that. I've been obsessing with the
director
Stanley
of player
Cup Final.
development for the Senators.
The Ottawa Senators.
Yeah,
Wow, director
like
of player
literally
development. How
2
cool
days
is that?
after he announced it. Yeah,
You know, the cool thing about Gagner too is like he's experienced a lot. Like, he's the son of an NHL player, so he grew up around it. He was obviously a star with the London Knights, and he was drafted very high by Edmonton. Probably, and I say this respectfully, maybe didn't live up to some of the offensive expectations, but just a solid pro. But the thing about Gagner too, he moved around a lot, right? He played for a lot of franchises. He played for brief stints in the American League. He'd be assigned to go down. He'd go down, and obviously I wasn't on the buses or anything like that, but you get the sense that he did it without complaining. He was just a pro's pro and a very well-liked, a beloved player, a beloved teammate, and you love to see him doing well there.
And as we're talking about these players, and I'm not painting anyone as a bad person. Like, I'm sure, like, when these guys get, I mean, Paul Maurice said it the best. Like, he's like, I hated Matthew Tkachuk. He's like, wait, that's a strong word. He backtracked. He's like, did not like Matthew Tkachuk when I was on the Jets. And now that I'm playing with him, he's a lovely person. Like, I see his family doing charities and taking in stray animals and all these things. And I'm sure, I'm going to say this. I shouldn't say it because Edmonton, all the fans are going to be like, fuck you. But I'm sure he is generally a nice person, and Sam Bennett and Brad Marchand and all these people off the ice. But it's the thing about hockey. How can you not be romantic and emotional and just 100% invested? There's no other sport like this where people get like so they go over the line. I'm like, you got to remember, this is a fucking game. Like, yes, it's great to win. Yes, it's great to have pride. But in the end, like these guys get off the ice, they're real human beings because people get so invested. Right?
Yeah, they do. They do. Speaking of invested.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to end that by saying the players that are loved the most are those guys like Connor McDavid, like Sam Gagner, like you're saying. Like these other guys, Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, Tkachuk, they'll retire and people will be like, they're great. Some of them will go to the Hall of Fame, I'm sure. But man, when you have a player like Connor or Sam Gagner who is just a role model and soft-spoken and humble, those are the guys that we really remember. And I was going to say used to be, but like Gretz, right? But now he's kind of, the air has kind of changed around that, but whatever.
EG says you can be a nice person off the ice and a complete dick on it.
Paul Maurice said as soon as the puck drops, it could be like, you're like a vampire. You sleep all day, and then at night you turn into a bloodthirsty,
100%. Yeah, I've someone who was it? Someone here was saying that like Brad Marchand can't really be that much of a rat, can he? Like in real life, he can't be really that annoying. I told you that brief story how we were at Archetype the other day. Me and a buddy, Andrew Walker. Working out on the treadmill.
Yeah,
and I'm only bringing this up. I'm only bringing this up so I can tell the story that we were working out.
Name drop.
But yeah, it was like basically like half the Panthers roster came in and went on all the treadmills right next to us.
Yeah.
Barkov, Kachuk, and Ekblad, and like all these guys, Reinhardt, and Marchand was there. And I will say this, in a very limited sample size.
Okay.
We weren't bugging them. They're working out. We're not going to talk to them.
No.
Plus,
You never.
like they're the enemy, right? So we didn't. Because when you see like they would count as a celebrity, obviously they're in the Stanley Cup Final, they're the reigning Stanley Cup champions, defending champions. You want to be like your brain just blurts out things like hey, good luck, but no, not good luck.
No,
but I will say not good luck at all. I hope you trip on the treadmill.
Say break a leg,
but literally, but Marchand was relatively delightful.
Well,
but again. There was limited interaction, and don't read too much into it.
Yeah, he has a job that he has found for himself. He literally said in an interview like 2 weeks ago, and it kind of gave me some perspective on why he is how he is. He says, as I was coming up as a hockey player when I was younger, I had a coach tell me, you just have to make an impact on the game, and you have to find out how you can do that. And he looked around, and he wasn't like the super fast guy. He was quick, but he wasn't the huge goal scorer. He's obviously a smaller player, so he wasn't impactful like that way. And he told a story. I can't remember exactly what the game happened, but basically he did some stuff in the corners that basically pissed off the other team and knocked them off of their game. And they ended up winning like in overtime or something like that. And basically at the end of the story, he said, after that game and after that talk from a coach, I said, hey, this is the way I can be successful in this game. By digging in, by getting in the corners, by agitating, by throwing the other team off their game mentally. And hey, everyone has to find their place in life, right? And if you can be as successful as he is doing it, I mean, I'm not going to say I love the guy because right now he infuriates me. And 2 months ago, during the Four Nations, I was enamored, but I was like, yes, this is great.
Well, wouldn't he be the perfect Oiler?
I'm telling you. That's why I was telling the Cassian story. But like, props to him. He found a way to be successful. That's what everyone does in life.
Mm-hmm. He's up for a contract at the end of the year. Could you imagine?
Oh, it's going to be fat. If he wins this cup, Florida's going to want him back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I don't know if they can afford him. So obviously it's a big night, and the fact that we're down there 1-1 going into Game 3. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that like my mom is hilarious. My mom wants every game to be 10-0 for the team that she's cheering for.
That's
my mom,
no fun.
she wants it. We always joke about this with her. We grind her gears on it because she's like she wants them to win 10-0 every game, 4 straight sweep.
Yeah.
I think I confided in you. I think I told you I admitted is the best word, that I did put a few bucks on a sweep just because I couldn't help myself. But the dream, that dream is now dead. And so now I'll obviously stick with my original prediction well, I just thought a sweep would just be so beautiful. But we knew that Florida's too good for that, so we'll see. Oilers in 6. Oilers in 6.
Like you're talking, love your mother. Love you and your dreams of sweeping. But I said from the start it was going to be 7. But in the back of my mind, of course, I'm thinking like sweep would be incredible.
You and I both wanted the sweep. But
when are sports the most exciting? It's never, it's great to win 8-1 every now and then in the regular season or 7-2 or 9-3 or whatever. But sports are the best when it's all on the line, when it's so close, or when you're down in the trenches and you make that comeback. That's when it feels the best. That's when the jubilation, the celebration after is at its peak. It's never like last year with Florida winning, such a close game, but was that not one of the most, I'm not going to say boring, but it was pretty slow.
Yeah.
Like intensity-wise, maybe it was just they were both tired at the end of a long series, but I was like, this is kind of one of the most boring Game 7s I've ever seen. So I want that intensity. I don't want double overtime, please. I'd like to go to sleep a little early tonight, Oilers. Can we end it in regulation?
Overtime in the Stanley Cup Final is a beautiful
it's
thing,
though.
It's
so crazy. But that Perry goal, 18 seconds, sending it into overtime, that's what sports is about.
I love that
Not
stuff.
the 8-1 wins.
Now, we have the luxury of doing this because we're not out of time, so I'll quickly say, no, as a matter of fact, I'm adjusting on the fly. John? Please give me the inspiring music, because the first episode of every week, courtesy of our friends at Solar by Kubi, we're tossing out anything that we had planned up until 10 seconds ago. But our friends at Solar by Kubi, that is inspiring music. But what I'm looking for...
This is my fault.
What I'm looking for is not my Jasper Memories presented every Wednesday by our friends at Tourism Jasper, but this, Positive Reflections, courtesy of our friends at Kubi Energy, a chance to step outside the news cycle, a chance to focus on something positive. And while we did have something else planned for this edition, we can pivot, because I see a very good point here. I see a very good point in the live chat, powered by Park Power.
A rare pivot.
How about this pivot from Plain Power, who says, how about we praise first responders? What about ER medical staff? What about those working in palliative care? What about those helping with cancer treatments? What about educators? What about those that are teaching our kids to employ thinking skills? But no, it's always about hockey. Well, no, it's not always about hockey, Plain Power, because you took the opportunity to chime in and share your thoughts on the show and remind all of us that while sport may bring us together, while sport may allow us to experience the highs and lows of voluntary emotional investment, the truth is our society is made stronger. Our society functions by those who show up each and every day, not just to their jobs, nay, but their callings, their careers, the applications of their skill sets, their empathy, their experience. And in many cases, the people doing some of the most important work are not getting rich. In fact, they're barely making enough to get by, and yet they still show up every single day, giving it their all for our young people, our future, for our seniors, for those that have gone before us and built this community that we're so lucky to be a part of. So Plain Power, thank you for the reminder as we wrap up this episode that yes, we have much to be grateful for, regardless of whether the Edmonton Oilers win the Stanley Cup or not. Maybe take a second today to thank someone in the ER, to thank maybe a paramedic that stopped for a coffee at the local shop, to thank a teacher. Maybe you'll have a chance to see him out on the strike line sometime soon, and you could bring a whole bunch of coffees by. I say it not to be glib, but that's just facts. We'll have updates on all the stories for you as the world continues to turn, but thank someone today, prompted by Plain Power, right here in Positive Reflections, made possible by our friends at Solar by Kubi. You can get a free solar quote today by visiting kubi.ca. A reminder, Real Talk is off on the 10th of June as we proudly support the Crystal Kids Golf Tournament, a fundraiser for a wonderful cause. We'll be back at it on June 11th with Mayor Jody Gondek and an exclusive concert reunion announcement. Make it a great day, friends, and thanks for supporting Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.